So we will go ahead and start off with some introductions. My name is Emily Gallivan, and I am Director of Programs with Chef Ann Foundation. You'll see on the slide my email is there if you have any questions that do not get answered in today's webinar, or if you think of something later on, please feel free to reach out to me via email. We are also joined by Chef Beth Collins. She is the owner of Lunch Lessons LLC and a school food systems consultant. She is a very important partner of this program and has been with us since the beginning of the program. And finally, we have Amber Watson. She is the Director of Nutrition Services for Marysville Joint Unified School District in California. And they are a 2018 program recipient, so we're very happy to have her here with us today as well to share a little bit about her experience. So just to go over today's agenda, we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about the Chef Ann Foundation. Then we will dive into the Get Schools Cooking program, the application process for Get Schools Cooking, and then Beth will dive into the assessment process and what that looks like. And then Amber will share Marysville Joint Unified School District's experience in the program. As for questions, we will be leaving some time at the end to get to those. We encourage you to enter your questions into the chat box at any time throughout the webinar. Our team is tracking those here, and so we will get to those at the end. I also want to mention that we are recording this webinar, so if you do have to leave at any time or have any colleagues that are interested in viewing the webinar, we will post that recording on the Lunchbox website. All right, so the Chef Ann Foundation, we were founded in 2009 by Chef Ann Cooper. Our mission is to provide school communities with the tools, training, resources, and funding that enables them to create healthier food and redefine lunchroom environments. So Chef Ann Cooper, she is a school food expert. She's the food service director at Boulder Valley School District. And rather than having districts continually reinvent the wheel, she wanted opportunities for school districts across the country. Our reach is over 3 million children in over 10,000 schools. If you're interested in learning more about the Chef Ann Foundation, you can check out our website at chefannfoundation.org. Now I'll just spend a little bit of time touching on our programs. We will obviously be diving deep into Get Schools Cooking, so I'm going to skip that for now. Salad Bars to Schools is exactly as it sounds. We grant out salad bars to schools to support them in serving more fresh fruits and vegetables. To date, we've granted out almost 6,000 salad bars, so we are really excited about that. The School Food Institute is our newest program. So those are online courses that are taught by Chef Ann Cooper. They provide school food service professionals and school nutrition advocates in-depth training on various topics related to supporting school districts in doing more scratch cooking. So those cover a wide range of topics. There's salad bar implementation, procurement, marketing, all kinds of really great information there. And then finally, we have the Lunchbox. So that is a free website that has all kinds of great online resources, including over 300 USDA compliant recipes, marketing materials, posters, financial spreadsheets, and tracking tools, procurement resources. All kinds of great things live on the Lunchbox, so be sure to check that out. As far as just staying in the loop, as far as the newest resources and grant opportunities with Chef Ann Foundation, we encourage you to follow us on our social channels, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. You can access those on our website or just search those applications, search in those applications for Chef Ann Foundation. Another great way to stay in the loop is through our Lunchbox newsletter. So that is our newsletter that is focused on operational content. We send that out every other month, so it won't fill up your inbox, we promise. And that always has great updates on operational content and resources, recipes, new grant opportunities, and just general school food news. All right, so now we're going to jump into the Get Schools Cooking program. And I want to take a moment here to provide a little shout out to our partner, Whole Kids Foundation. We could not do this important work without them, so a big thank you to them. As far as the Get Schools Cooking program mission, our mission is to provide school districts the operational foundation necessary to transition their food and nutrition service departments from a heat and serve or process model to one that is rooted in scratch cooking using real ingredients. So what is the process for doing that? I'm going to go through the program components fairly quickly here. Of course, it starts with the application. Then we do an interview, a virtual interview with the food service director and their direct supervisor. Once districts are selected, we host a kickoff workshop in Boulder, Colorado. The food service director and one other key personnel will come out for that. This cohort, it will be held at the end of February, and the program covers all travel expenses for that workshop. Then we have the assessment and report. Beth will be diving into this much deeper, but this is the big piece of this program. This is an assessment of the district's school meal program and a report that outlines recommendations as well. There's also the comprehensive strategic plan that outlines those recommendations and next steps, as well as the district-owned action plan. So that is to support the districts in creating their own plan for addressing the recommendations as far as who will be working on certain things, the timeline, all of those details to help move them forward and make progress. Then we have on-site training and off-site technical assistance. So this will serve to provide additional support to districts as they work to make change based on their assessment and those recommendations. So these will both be based on that assessment process and that strategic plan, and will help the district again move forward. Then there is the Systems Assistance Grant. So that is $35,000 that a district can use towards equipment, software, and training. Districts do have to complete a little application outlining their plan for the use of those funds in order to receive them, but it's fairly straightforward and easy. And I do want to take a moment to mention here that while there are training and equipment funding opportunities, the primary focus of this grant is the assessment and strategic planning process. And then we partner with Gretchen Swanson Center for Nutrition to do yearly evaluations to assess districts' progress over the course of 2 years. So this map is a nice demonstration of the districts that we have worked with so far in this program. The 2019 cohort will be the fourth cohort in this program. So far, we have worked with 15 districts in 12 states, and they really vary as far as demographics, whether they're rural or urban. Some are smaller, some are a little bit larger. It really varies based on the district. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I just wanted to give folks a sense of what participating districts have accomplished as a result of participating in the Get Schools Cooking program. So it again varies based on districts and where they're at, but many have implemented salad bars, so they're serving more fresh fruits and vegetables. They've established efficiencies through the use of new technology and tracking spreadsheets, introduced raw proteins. They've done a lot of great work. This is just a small sampling of the things the districts have accomplished. So just some application details. Up to 4 districts will be selected as part of the 2019 cohort. The application is open. The deadline is October 28th. We will be conducting interviews, again, with food service director and their direct supervisor from December 6th through the 13th, and then districts will be selected by the end of the year. Eligibility requirements. Districts must participate in the National School Lunch Program, and they must be able to demonstrate support from district leadership. That is part of the reason that we have the food service director's direct supervisor on those interview calls to make sure they fully understand the scope of the program and are on board as well. As far as size eligibility, districts must have a minimum district enrollment of 3,000 students and serve between 4 and 30 schools. They also must be firmly committed to working towards a scratch-cooked and fresh whole ingredient approach to their meal programs. And finally, they must run a self-operated food service program. So you will find the link to apply on both the Chef and Foundation and the Lunchbox websites. That will take you to our grant portal where you can access the application. And so now I am going to go ahead and pass the controls over to Beth, and she's going to dive in a little bit deeper into the application and assessment process.
Great, good afternoon, everyone. Let's see if I can actually advance the slide. Still having some problems here. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I just want to touch base again on the application. It's really not a difficult application to fill out. I think the questions are pretty straightforward, but I do encourage people to be very complete in your answers. It's really, we use the application to narrow down the applicant pool to the interview process. So not everybody who applies is going to have an interview. One thing that I think is really important for districts to understand is that without the support of your administration for this process, it's not going to work very well for you. You really, in school food change work in general, we see it as a top-down, bottom-up situation. You really need the support of your superintendent, your all of the team members that are supporting food services work in the district in order for it to be successful, because the work is so complex. And a lot of the administrators don't always understand what food service directors do, and I think the assessment process is one of those areas where we're sort of the interpreters in a way of the school food work, and we highlight the work that's happening in the district, which is positive for the food service department. But it's best to go into the work with some support. Being isolated is really a tough place to be in food service and school districts. Okay. Emily, can you just advance the slides for me? That might be easier. Okay, thank you. So what is the assessment process? Essentially, it has several components. There's myself, a financial analyst, Lauren Farrell, who's a retired CBO, and Ann Cooper also visits the districts depending on the size. But in the assessment process, we're really looking at the strengths and challenges of the school district. We're looking at where are you right now? So we spend quite a bit of time before we come to the district collecting a lot of data, and Amber can speak to this. It's more of a deep dive into your details than I think a lot of people expect, but it's really what we need to get a really accurate view of where your program is. On the fiscal side, Lorraine will look at literally everything, anything you can think of, she's going to look at. She's really defining what are the processes that are happening in your district, who's connected to who are the main players. We interview a lot of people when we're on site. Depending on the size of the district, we'll be in your district anywhere from 5 to 10 days. And then afterwards, we will continue to interface with you as we go through analyzing the data we've collected and preparing the report process. So there's a lot of little pieces in the assessment. You can go ahead and advance. On the operations side, that's the area that I spend most of the time on. We're really looking at your history. We're looking at your personnel, human resources areas, all of your key processes, what makes food service departments work. It's people, it's food, it's your facilities, and it's how you relate with the community and with the administration. So we're really looking at everything with a lot of detail. Go ahead and advance. A lot of people get a little apprehensive about, oh, are you going to be visiting the school sites? What are you looking at? We're really looking at, I'm an observer in the sites. I really want to be like a fly on the wall, not drawing a lot of attention to myself, but really seeing your teams in action so I can get a good sense of how the teams are being led, how they're being trained, how they interface with the students and with each other, what kind of facility are they working in, are they efficient, what types of support could they use, what sort of tools do they have to work with to be successful every day. These are things that are common to every school district food service across the country, and that's what we're looking at. Go ahead and advance. And then finally, the community and stakeholder engagement is an important piece. We find districts that have really broad engagement with the parent base and the community, with community partners, are often more successful in their food program change. A lot of the districts that have received this grant it's not like they're starting from ground zero. Very often, the districts have been engaged in trying to shift their procurement models, their production models. They may have shifted some of their staffing to help with a more complex production model. They may have a community that really wants the kids to have access to the freshest food possible, or are very engaged in the farm to school activities, depending on where the district's located. We do see a lot of that. So we do look for programs that are already on the path of change. And for the most part, I'd say districts that apply for the grant have made some changes in their programs away from processed foods. In your application, you'll have an opportunity to really explain that. We ask, why are you applying for the grant? For a lot of districts, that opportunity to have someone come in and give an unbiased review of their program is really valuable, because most directors don't have time to really spend a lot of time analyzing themselves. I know everybody tries to do a good job in that so that they continually improve, but it's a very tough thing to do. You just don't have a lot of time. So that's what we are bringing in that assessment process. Go ahead. Okay, so the timeline, we did touch on this briefly. the pre-visit data collection, we're usually going to be in touch with you at least 2 months ahead of your scheduled assessment. If we have, let's say we have the grant selects 4 districts, your actual assessment time might be 6 months or 7 months from the time that the grant is and the workshop happens, depending on where you are, what your calendar is. We're trying to coordinate all of the districts. We visit all the districts twice because we come to do the assessment, then we write your report, which usually takes 6 to 8 weeks. Then we come back and we do a presentation on the report. We call it the debrief. And that's when we do a strategic action planning time with you to develop your action plans and your strategy. So it's a long process. It's not a one and done sort of thing. You know, it's like it's a deep dive, and Amber can give you a very honest opinion of what her experience was. That's why we have her on the call, because she was right there and went right through it, every little nitty gritty detail. Right, Amber? So I think I'm going to pass it over to Amber right now. Thank you.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for having me. I switch slides. There we go. Okay. Oops. All right. So I'm the Director of Nutrition Services at Marysville School District, and we are in Northern California, about 40 miles north of Sacramento. We have kind of a rural community, but we do have town and city schools, as well as more mountainous rural schools as well. So here's kind of a snapshot of our district. So we're kind of a medium-sized district, slightly growing in enrollment from year to year. And we are a district-wide CEP. We started in 2016-17 with district-wide CEP, and then I redid the CEP in 2018-19 with a higher free and reduced ISP. We have 24 schools, and we do have a district centralized storage facility, but we're considered self-producing out of our 15 kitchens, and then we have 3 kitchens producing for 9 satellite sites based on the vicinity of that main kitchen. We do have a growing enrollment. I mentioned we are busting at the seams with our schools, so we have a kind of a school growth plan to add a middle school right now and kind of redesign the boundary lines of our district. We have kind of a wide range of demographics. We are very low income, as I mentioned, but we also have pockets that are more affluent, partly because we're only 40 miles from Sacramento, so there are families that will work in Sacramento but commute and capitalize on the lower housing in our area. We also have the Air Force base near us, and then we're challenged with increasing homeless students. We have a large migrant population in our area as well. And then in California, we're challenged with the rising minimum wage amount. So currently our minimum wage is at $12 an hour, and in January it'll go to $13 an hour, and then in 2022 it'll go to $15 an hour. So we may see qualification change drastically as the years go by. So why did we apply? We have kind of a, well, we thought we had kind of a speed scratch and more of a scratch operation, but we were really disjointed. We had pizza from scratch, as you can see on one of those slides. We were making our dough at some sites from scratch, and then we were using a pre-made crust at others. We also had the general fast food style menu items like corn dogs and chicken nuggets and wrapped burritos. We were trying to develop more scratch recipes, but we're kind of competing with ourselves with having those heat and serve items on the menu at the same time. So we were pretty disjointed. We also felt like we had plateaued in our own expertise in-house for growing our menu and growing our participation. And we were looking for a little bit outside support, and this grant fit right in that at the right time for us. We have at the time I applied, we had a strong climate of support from my staff. They were very engaged, they still are very engaged in training and learning more, spending time even after hours at optional trainings that's offered through our local school nutrition association, or extra things that I've offered to those that want to take advantage. So very engaged group of employees. So we are fortunate with that. And then we're also district-wide CEP. So we've reduced the barriers of getting access to meals. Our administration with the principals and superintendent were very supportive of our meal program, and our participation has increased drastically with CEP and maintained and even grown after its original implementation. Our experience, so on the application process, it is a very thorough application, so take your time. I think that's the biggest thing I can recommend to you is not filling it out in haste or in a hurry. I tend to be that type of kind of last minute jam to get it in, but I highly recommend scheduling time and doing some research. I was on the phone talking with my staff and trying to get some history of things even before I was here, because scratch cooking kind of started before I came. So I was trying to summarize kind of the overall progression of how we landed with where we were at that point a year and a half ago. It's also a good thing, or a good suggestion, to express where you feel your weaknesses are. Where would you like to do better? What are things that this grant can accomplish in, I guess, kind of where your goals are. What do you want to do? Where do you want your meal program to be in 3 to 5 years? And then just remember, you're asking for help, so you don't have to know the answers to everything. What was unique about this grant is, you know, we didn't submit a scope for money to do a specific thing. This grant is heavy on that assessment period, as Beth mentioned. And you don't have to exactly know what to do to make your program better. This grant process is going to help you in that, in recognizing the challenges of your district. With me, facilities is a huge challenge. And so we want to do better menu and more fresh cooking, but our facilities are pretty bad. So the assessment address and the report addresses that, and helped us with recommendations that kept that in mind. So the assessment period, so that's after the workshop. Ours was pretty close to the workshop, so I got really excited. I was able to take a team member, and it was a really good experience for us. It was overwhelming, exciting at the same time. So we were ready to go. I was fortunate to have it so close that I was ready and excited. So there's a ton of things that are asked before they arrive at your door. So there's a huge section or documents. I was asked to submit documents from the complete prior fiscal year, as well as year-to-date data. So it did take organizing things in the format that they wanted, or reaching out to other departments to access things or learn how to run a report in the financial system that is not a report I normally use. So I had to reach out and get some help in that way. We had a 2-week on-site visit with a number of schools. We're, I think, one of the larger districts that's gotten this grant. So your visit may not be as long. The first day and a half were really just kind of interviews and getting a feel for what our department's all alike and or about, and you know what we want to do. So the goal setting was brought up at that first day. So have an idea of what you want this to accomplish, or where you want your program to go in the next 3 to 5 years. You may already know that. I had a rough draft of it, but I had to put some effort and some thought into that during that 2-week period, and we revisited on the last day with a more defined goal. And that's one of the key things, is to be very active in that. I think this whole process is really supportive in what your facility can do and support, and where you want your program to go. If the goals are not serious or important to you, then the report isn't going to be helpful to you, because they're not going to be aligned. So really take some time and thought into what you want out of that, and it'll mean a lot. At least it did for me. On the final report, it's a huge document. I was blown away. It took a couple weeks for me to get through it and reread sections. I had no idea the depth it was going to be. I was so impressed. And the report included a whole section on what the on-site visit kind of collected, and it was so accurate and true representation of what my operation is. It was really comforting to know that what we do transpired to the Chef Ann team. So that was really nice, and makes me feel really confident in the Chef Ann Foundation and in all of that, because it was so accurate. And then the debrief was a little nerve-wracking. I had a superintendent there, and the assistant superintendents, and then all the business division directors, you know, that needed to hear the information, because there was areas that touched their departments with purchasing and facilities and accounting. So I was a little nervous, but it was done so professionally done, and it just was engaging, and I think just really well done. I was very pleased with that. So what we're working on now, so we had, I think, 71 recommendations. I don't want to scare you with the number of recommendations, but we have quite a few. Some were easy to check off. I did them even in some cases before the debrief even happened, because after the assessment, I knew kind of what to work on, and I had an idea of where to go from there, because it was so engaging during that on-site visit. And some of them are much bigger. So these are some examples of the bigger ones on the screen here. We really needed to build some efficiencies in our systems of purchasing and menu planning. So we did do a request for proposal for a back office support software. So it included menu planning, ordering, and inventory function. We are trying to front load the system right now. We selected a company, and now we're putting all our data in, and hope to go live hopefully in October, at least for a couple menus anyways. We're also working on the efficiencies in considering the menu first. I think I had some operations done, or I know I had some operations done kind of out of order and backwards, and time is always lacking in school nutrition. So sometimes I just rolled bids over, or rolled things over into the next year. But you know, I had things on my bid or purchasing that were no longer on my menu, and so there was just some discrepancies there. So I really spent some time redesigning my menu and jumped 2 feet in with recommendations from the chef and team to go to a 6-week menu cycle for my lunch and align all my menus into a similar structure and format so that the menu items are purchased and menued on the same day across all menus. And that's been a huge benefit for us. We did scale down, so we are a little bit challenged with the frequency, or we're doing more ingredient-based menu planning now instead of heat and serve products. So one shortage of one ingredient has a cascading effect. So we are learning a huge learning curve right now for that change. On the staff reorganization, we are doing this slowly over time. We're not doing an overhaul, but I was able to create a new position and fill that this summer to have a menu planner and somebody to oversee the culinary side of our operation, because I was doing everything and it was not being done well because of lack of time on my end. And then the last thing we're working on is operating off of a balanced budget. We've overspent from year to year, had a fund balance that really supported that enough, but it's dwindling away. And my boss was caught off guard a little bit when that was brought up during the assessment, and it didn't trigger anything on his end because I had a fund balance to cover the over expenditure, but it happened 5 years in a row. So I'm pleased to even share that this past year we had $15,000 put back into the bank at the end of the year. So that was even after salary increases. So it gives a huge encouragement for us to keep going and really see that the changes we've made are even showing, proving and showing efforts already, or showing the fruit of it already. Exciting. I think I have a couple more slides. Emily, can you advance that? I'm having trouble. Thank you. So just kind of a recap of what I recommend for you to kind of consider while you're doing the application process is really look at your goals and be specific. So is it implementing a breakfast in the classroom program? Is it a participation increase? Be specific in that, because that's going to help the chef and team in what data they're collecting and what recommendations to write. And then just know that it's a long commitment, and the grant says 3 years, but in reality, I feel that it's a much longer commitment, because this grant is a systems change grant. So even after I'm done with my 3rd year of this grant, I'm still looking at these systems to be in place. So it's really a change for the long term and moving forward. And be transparent and honest in the assessment period and the data collection period. It's okay if you don't know the answers to everything. Sometimes we have to reach out to other people and get the answer, or in some cases, Beth might know the answer because she was at the site, and that's okay too. We don't have to know all the answers to everything. And then I do recommend communicating to employees and administration staff about, what is this grant about? It's not an audit. It's not an administrative review. It's not checking that they're following a HACCP plan. It's really looking at what is the current operation at or doing, and then what are the capabilities for improvement if small changes can be made over time. And then there's a process to it. So Beth will ask everything and Laureen will ask everything. And I don't think I always knew why they were asking certain things, but then I saw it in the report and it connected. So just be patient in that. And I think Laureen and Beth's retention on information just blew me away. It was amazing. They knew my staff's name, they knew the sites, And I was just amazed at how much they just engrossed themselves into my operation for those 2 weeks. And even when I'm on a call, even after that 2 weeks, they were still referencing site specific and knowing the specific details. So they can handle detailed information. So give them as much as you can, and thorough information. And then just enjoy it. It's been a huge learning process. I think I've become a better director and a better program manager out of this whole process. We're probably only maybe a third of the way in completing all of our recommendations, but we're in progress with probably most of them, if not all of them, making efforts on in some one way or another. And so I highly recommend it. I can't say enough good things about it. I think that's it for me.
Thank you, Amber, so much. So now we've got about 15 to 20 minutes to do some questions. So our team has been collecting those. So we will go ahead and start off with those. All right. So we've got, okay, we've got several questions here. Okay. So the first question is, we are a coalition of 3 school districts with a total of 5 schools. Would we be eligible to apply? So as far as taking in a coalition of school districts, they do have to be one singular school district with that size requirement of 3,000 students and then 4 to 30 schools. So we unfortunately cannot work with school districts within this program that are a collaboration or coalition of multiple districts. All right. Then the next question we have is, we already work with a consultant who has made key changes to staffing and is currently working with staff on food cooking skills. Would we still be eligible for the grant? Beth, do you want to talk a little bit about that? And if I think there would still be value for the grant. If you want to touch on that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to know. It sort of depends on, all the other factors in your district. If the consultant you're working with is going to be with your district for the long term, then they would kind of become part of the assessment process also. So if you've only have the consultant for a limited amount of time, and you may be applying for this grant now, and then that consultant's not there in a year, when because it realistically could be next year before you would have your assessment, then you just have to take that into consideration as far as looking at your application and whether it makes sense to have the assessment. The assessment's going to be looking at everything you do. So if you don't have that process hasn't been performed prior to the changes you're making, having the assessment might be really valuable, but it just sort of depends on timing and how much bandwidth you have to engage in the process. The assessment process takes engagement. There's a lot of technical assistance that happens while we're on site. We interact with you the entire time. It's not a passive experience at all. So
great, thanks, Beth. That's helpful. So next question is, what are the biggest mistakes on the applications for us to avoid? So Beth, I think I'll touch on this a little bit, but then I'll pass it over to you. I think a couple of the big pieces, one Beth touched on, is support and buy-in from district administration. So that's a big key piece, and that'll really show through in the interview. So as far as the application, a big piece that our review team is looking at is the data. And just looking at that, can you pull the data? Can you compile it and adequately submit that data? Beth, do you want to add to this?
Yeah, I think, I don't like to say that people are making mistakes in their applications. It's just most of the time that the answers are incomplete, or they haven't provided the information we need. We did try to simplify the application a little bit more, or state some of the things in the application a little more clearly this year to help with that. But when we ask for what is your enrollment and eligibility data by site for 18-19, that should be pretty straightforward, but it's surprising how many districts don't answer that. You know, they can't provide the data in a readable format. Or the same thing with average daily participation. We want not, sometimes we'll get monthly reports. They'll load up monthly reports of this data. We really want the ADP for your last complete school year by site. So it's not, it sounds simple, but sometimes it takes multiple times. We will ask you to reload the data if it's not correct, but it's, if you can, if you have any questions about what you need to load, ask Emily. You can email Chef Ann Foundation and ask questions before you finalize the application. That's why Amber's recommendation of not doing this last minute is really useful. I can tell you historically, and having been somebody who has written a lot of grants myself, I'm guilty of this as well, but a lot of districts don't actually get their apps completed until like the absolute last second deadline. So if you're that type of person, just get going on it now, because you're really just a little over a month out of the deadline, and it's just easier to, you know, kind of break down the application and spend time on it, you know, edit it, you know, is have somebody else read your narrative. Does your narrative make sense? Is it well written? All of that stuff does come into play. So those are the little things I would say are important.
Great. Thank you, Beth. That's great detail. The next question is, do all awarded schools receive the $35,000 to use in their department? So as I mentioned, districts are required to submit a short application outlining their plan for the use of those funds. So a majority of districts have received those funds. So, you know, I can't say 100% that you'll automatically receive those, but it's fairly unlikely that you won't, as long as you're tying those funds to the recommendations in your assessment. That is the biggest thing, and that you're showing progress in addressing those recommendations. You know, that you didn't just go through the assessment process to get the $35,000 to buy new ovens, that you're actually working towards implementing those recommended changes. All right, so the next question is my district eligible if we use a food service management company? We are looking to move away from using the food service management company. So can this program provide the expertise and help us become self-operated? Beth, do you want to touch on this?
Yeah, one of the parameters of the grant is that you are self-operated. It's a little bit of a conflict, because I would agree that it's useful to assess your situation prior to making a large decision like moving to self-op. But for the grant purposes, you need to be self-operated. And I think that speaks to the foundation's commitment to work with districts that are on a path to change. The investment in the assessment is large, so it's when districts transition from contract managed to self-op, there's a lot of structural change that happens depending on what state you're in, because these things do vary slightly by state, but that really would take away from the ability to really assess the program in its intended purpose. So that assessment will be more about those changes. So I think that's why we've decided to focus on districts that are already self-op. It's very risky to engage in that otherwise. In some cases, a contract managed district doesn't have a director. So if we went into a district that was still contract managed and wanted to change to self-op and they don't have a director, it just doesn't work with the way our program's designed.
Great, thank you, Beth. And I'll just expand on that a little bit in relation to another question that came in about a district that has 42 schools. And so if you are a district that is either over or under the size requirements or currently operating under a food service management company and looking to do self-operated, you can please feel free to email me, because we have had a handful of districts reach out that are outside of our eligibility requirements, and we are keeping a list of those districts for future opportunities as far as training or workshops or further support down the line. So this specific opportunity just may not be the right thing for you. All right. So the next question is, what is the best way to determine staff and administration buy-in? So Amber, I'd like to start with you for this and just kind of talking about your process for making sure that your district administration and your staff were on board with this program.
Well, I don't know that I had a tool to measure that. I think I talked with them a lot. I had a structure for kind of menu advisement even prior to the grant. I used a menu committee. I have, at the time I had 16 managers, now I have 15. So in a manager meeting, it's hard to discuss menu change or plans with that many folks involved. So I had already implemented a smaller committee of 4 to 5 managers plus myself and a support staff here. And we tested new products and we're really driving what the menu was looking like for everybody. So it was kind of a representation committee. And so through that, we had engagement. Also, when there's training opportunities, we had the California School Nutrition Association conference here in Sacramento one year. I put a little bit more travel money into that budget that year to try and send more staff, and it was highly well received. So they gave up their weekends for it, and they loved testing the new products. They had a lot of questions. So trying to find opportunities for them to learn more about the job. And about half of my staff are already, or no, more than that, already had a ServSafe Manager certificate. So those were being done extra on their own time after work. So just maybe offering extra things and seeing who grabs on, or providing information and seeing what kind of the interest is. And when I first came here, we weren't in the same boat. I think it was a struggle. I'd offer things and maybe 8 people showed up. And so now I'll offer things and 25 to 35 will show up. So it did happen over time, and maybe survey what their interests are, what they want to know more about, and then meet the need there. And if they're being heard and given opportunity to have an input or a say or test new things, then typically the engagement will increase.
Great. Thank you, Amber. All right, we have time for a couple more questions. The next question is, can we include the online courses as part of our budget expenditures and a plan for moving towards scratch cooking? So the School Food Institute courses, we do include in the program. You'll receive 2 gold certificate scholarships, essentially. So that means you can take, you as a food service director and another team member can take 8 courses, 8 of the 11 courses offered on the School Food Institute. So that will be part of the program, but you can certainly also, as part of that systems assistance grant, apply to receive or apply for additional scholarships for additional staff members. And I just want to mention to Jennifer, I will connect with you individually since your question is a little bit more specific to your school district, so we will connect offline. So we'll do one more school district, or one more question. How many applications do you typically receive, and then how many are awarded? So for the last round, the last cohort, Amber's cohort, we received, I believe, about 12 to 15 applications and accepted 4 into the cohort. And we interviewed 7 of those districts. So, you know, it's, as we mentioned, the application is a little bit more thorough, and, you know, the program is a little bit more intensive. So we don't tend to get, you know, hundreds of applications, but we are only selecting 4 districts, so it's a little bit more minimal, so to speak. I just received a question about repeating the information on the scholarships, so I'll go ahead and repeat that information. So as part of the program, recipients will receive scholarships to the School Food Institute, which is one of the programs of Chef Ann Foundation. So those are those online courses that are taught by Chef Ann Cooper. So you will receive a set number of scholarships, and then if you wish to receive additional ones for additional team members, you can use apply to use some of your grant funds towards those scholarships. So I hope that provides a little bit of clarity. All right, and I think, we'll answer this last question. It's a pretty quick question here. What is the maximum size of school districts that can apply? So the maximum size is 30 schools. That being said, if you're at like 31 or 32, that's okay. But beyond that, it gets a little bit difficult just with the time spent on site with the assessment process. They are going out and visiting every school site. So we limit it to that 30 school number. All right, so I think we went through all of the questions. If we missed your question or you have additional questions, please do feel free to reach out. Again, my email is Emily and then the letter G at chefannfoundation.org. And we thank you all for joining us today and look forward to receiving your application. And I also want to thank Beth and Amber for joining us and sharing their expertise and insight as well. So thank you, everyone.